Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we've got another news rumor video here to discuss. In today's video, we're looking at some signings from our past couple of days, some injury updates, we got a couple pieces of news, and we've got some trade rumors involving Hurricanes, the Flames, the Los Angeles Kings, and the Pittsburgh Penguins. We'll get to all the updates coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Before we get started, don't forget to like this video and subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do without all of you guys, so if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't forget to comment. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. And don't forget to stay tuned for videos coming in the very near future. Sorry if there's any background noise here today. But in today's video, we've got another news rumor review here to discuss. So just a quick reminder here, this is my last week of regularly scheduled videos. We will have a couple more videos coming out throughout the next couple of weeks, but from December 20th to January 4th, I'm not doing regularly scheduled videos, just be a couple of pre-recorded ones. So keep that in mind. But in today's video, we got one of our last trade reviews of the 2025 portion of the 25-26 season. So today we're going to start off by looking at a couple of injury updates. There were some very interesting injury updates from the past couple of days, so we'll start off with them here. So first, Connor Bedard, who has recently been placed on injury reserve, has a separated shoulder. So the fact that he's going to be reevaluated in January means that it's only a grade 1 or 2 separated shoulder, which means if it's a grade 1, he's only out for about a couple of weeks. If it's a grade 2, he's out for a month or two, so that's probably why he's going to be reevaluated in January. So it doesn't seem like it's a serious separated shoulder injury, but that's the injury that Blackhawks star forward Connor Bedard is currently dealing with. So very interesting note there. For the Los Angeles Kings, Darcy Kempe, who left Monday's game with upper body injury, was placed on injury reserve. So hopefully it's not a bad injury there for the Los Angeles Kings. But very interesting note there that Kempe has been placed on injured reserve. Marcus Foligno, who was out almost 3 weeks with a lower body injury, was actually off of injury reserve and returned to game action on Tuesday. So really good stuff there for Foligno. That's a big boost for the Wild to get a solid top 9 forward back into the lineup. Well, Jonas Brodin, who has missed a few games with a lower body injury, was placed in IR, will be out until at least Saturday. That's the earliest he can be activated. So very interesting note there, but the Wild do lose solid defenseman who have already missed for the past couple of games, but they do get a solid top 9 forward back in Marcus Foligno. So really good stuff there for the Wild. Mike Matheson missed Tuesday's game with undisclosed injury and is out day to day. Hopefully it's not a severe injury because Matheson is a big piece of the Canadiens' top 4, but he will miss at least the next little bit, so very interesting note there. Cole Smith, who missed 19 games with upper body injury, was actually off of injury reserve and returned to game action on Wednesday, so it's a big boost to the Preds bottom 6 as they were able to get Cole Smith. Simo Nemec, who missed 2 games with a lower body injury, will be out at least until after the Christmas break. It seems like he'll be reevaluated in 2 weeks. It's not great news there, but that's very interesting note there for Simo Nemec. Brett Pesce, who missed almost 2 months with undisclosed injury, was actually off of injury reserve and returned to game action on Wednesday. So big boost there for the Devils as they get one of their solid veteran players and Brett Pesce back into the lineup. Arseny Grutsuik, who almost missed a week with an injury, was placed in injury reserve. So very interesting note there. Hopefully he won't miss too much time because Grutsuik has actually been a really solid rookie for the Devils, but he has been placed on injured reserve. Lars Eller has a broken foot and will miss 3 weeks. That's a bad blow there for our Senators. Well, Thomas Chabot, who missed a few weeks with an upper body injury, might be able to return on Saturday, which would be a big boost to the Senators' D-core. So very interesting note there, but it seems like Chabot's going to return and Lars Eller's going to be out for a couple of weeks. Rasmus Ristolainen was actually off of injury reserve and made his season debut on Tuesday after having season-ending surgery last season. So really great news there as Ristolainen is back into the lineup for the Philadelphia Flyers. That's a big boost to their D-core. Well, Tyson Forrester underwent an arm procedure. He was originally scheduled to be out for about 2 or 3 months. Now they're saying he's going to be out at least 5 months. So unless the Flyers go on some semi-deep playoff run this year, it doesn't seem like Forrester's going to be back at some point this year. So that's a bad blow there for the Philadelphia Flyers as they lose Tyson Forrester, who is a really solid top 6 forward. So very interesting note there. Will Smith, who was on IR with undisclosed injury, will be out at least 1 week. So it doesn't seem like it's an overly huge injury, but he probably will be out until after the Christmas break. Philip Kurashev, who was on IR with undisclosed injury, is out week to week, so that might be able to bleed into the start of the new year. So hopefully Kurashev won't be out for too long. And Shakir Mukhamadullin, who has been out 5 of the last 6 games with an upper body injury, returned to game action on Tuesday. So very interesting note there. Mukhamadullin makes a great return to the San Jose Sharks. It's a big boost to their blue line, so very interesting note there. Andrei Vasilevskiy, who had missed 7 games with undisclosed injury, was actually off of injury reserve and will return when the Bolts get into game action later today on Thursday. So great news there for the Bolts as they get their starting level goaltender back into the lineup. Joseph Woll, who missed 4 games with a lower body injury, was actually off of injury reserve and returned to game action on Tuesday. So great news there for the Toronto Maple Leafs as they get one of their 2 starting level goaltenders back. Stolarz is still out, but getting Woll back is a big boost for the Maple Leafs. Jeremy Lauzon, who missed 14 games with undisclosed injury, was active off of injury reserve and returned to game action on Wednesday. Not a terribly huge boost, but Lauzon's a serviceable third pair defenseman, so that is a pretty big boost there for the Vegas Golden Knights. So some very interesting injury updates from our past couple of days, as those are some of the very interesting injury updates from our past few days. Next, going over to some reassignments, recalls, and waiver updates. So when it comes to some reassignments, the Buffalo Sabres have reassigned Isaac Rosen, the Wild have reassigned Hunter Hayes, the Islanders Travis Mitchell, the New York Rangers Kemlar and Berard, the Flyers Murchison, the Blues McGing, and the Bolts Sabrin and Halverson. So some very interesting players being sent back down to the minors, while Copley in LA was recalled, probably due to the Kempe injury. Lambos from Minnesota was recalled, probably because of the Brodin injury. Laguerre in New Jersey was recalled, probably because of the uncertainty of guys like Nemec and Gritsuyk. And Perreault and Othman were recalled by New York. They sent down Kemlar and Berard. And finally, you're going to see Othman and Perreault in the Rangers' top 9. I want to see this all season long. I think it will really help the Rangers out offensive scoring-wise. So very interesting note there, but some very interesting recalls and reassignments from our past couple of days. We're going to the waiver update. In our last video, we talked about how 3 players were on waivers, and there was a possibility we could see any 3 of them get claimed. That was Brossoit in Chicago, Kolyashynok in Dallas, and Berggren in St. Louis. Now in that video, I said Kolyashynok could potentially get claimed. I thought he would most likely clear. I thought Brossoit most likely clear because he was coming off of injury reserve and his cap hit. I said there might be a team or two out there who could take a chance on Berggren. Someone did take a chance on Berggren, and that was the St. Louis Blues. So his $1.8 million cap, it didn't scare them. The Blues are dealing with a couple of injuries. The guys like, I think it was Dylan Holloway right now, and a couple of other guys. So they could really use some forward help. So acquiring Jonathan Berggren isn't a bad pickup here for the St. Louis Blues, and I really do think this could be a really solid fit here. So Berggren's time in Detroit comes to an end via the waiver wire, and we shall see how Berggren does in the top 9 role in the St. Louis Blues organization. But he wasn't even the only waiver claim from those 3 guys, as the Boston Bruins claimed Vladislav Kolyashynok off of waivers. So we know they just lost Jonathan Espiriot to injury. I think they do have a couple of blue line injuries right now, so they could use a serviceable third pair defenseman, which Kolyashynok is. He's shown that in Dallas, Pittsburgh, Utah, Arizona. So this is not a bad pickup here from the Bruins either, especially with their blue line injuries. I think he could be a really serviceable third pair defenseman for the Bruins for the rest of this year if he doesn't go back on waivers. So very interesting note there, but Kolyashynok has been claimed off of waivers by the Boston Bruins. And then of course Laurent Brossoit, because of his cap hit coming off of an injury, he did wind up clearing. I don't think that's too surprising. So very interesting note there, but Brossoit cleared. However, Kolyashynok and Berggren were claimed off of waivers. So very interesting note there. Another guy who was placed on waivers was Arshdeep Bains in the Canucks organization. He was placed on waivers. The Canucks got a little bit healthier, but they acquired Rossi, Ogre, and Bouin from Minnesota, so they needed some more roster flexibility. So they placed Bains on waivers. Now, I thought there might have been a team or two out there who could claim him because he's actually been a decent like bottom 6 forward this year, but I wouldn't have been too surprised if he did clear, and he did clear. So he's still in the Canucks organization. He's going back down to the AHL. We shall see how Bains does, but Bains did wind up being placed on waivers and cleared waivers, so no one wound up claiming him. So those are all the waiver updates from our past couple of days. Next, going over to just a couple of quick news pieces here. So first, Sam Montembeault, who hasn't played the NHL level in a couple of weeks, has been placed on a conditioning stint to the minors. So very interesting note there, the Habs will be running with a Dobesh and Fowler tandem for at least the time being, and Montembeault's going to get some playing time at the AHL level. Montembeault's had a really terrible start to the season, so very interesting note there. We shall see how Montembeault does at the NHL level, but very interesting note there is Montembeault has been sent down a conditioning stint. Michael Misa has officially now been loaned to the World Juniors. So very interesting note there. Michael Misa is a big piece of the team in the World Juniors. He was left off the team last year, so he's going to get his invite this year. We shall see how Misa does. He had a really solid start to the Sharks organization with the San Jose Sharks tenure, but he has now been loaned to World Juniors. So very interesting note there. We shall see how he does at the World Juniors, but Misa will be joining Team Canada for the World Junior Championship. So very interesting note there. The Hoffman Group has officially purchased the Pittsburgh Penguins after a couple of years ago when the Fenway Group purchased the Pittsburgh Penguins. Now the Fenway Group has sold it to the Hoffman Group. So I don't know much about the selling stuff. I don't know much about the Hoffman Group, but it's just very interesting to know that the Pittsburgh Penguins have been sold again. So very interesting note there, and we shall see what happens after they get sold again. It does still have to be approved by the Board of Governors, but still very interesting that the Pittsburgh Penguins have officially changed hands again and have been sold, so very interesting note there. And lastly, going over to Alex Tuch. According to a recent report, I think it was from Pierre LeBrun in TSN's Insider Trading, he was talking about the Buffalo Sabres, and he says that Alex Tuch is currently looking for a AAV of above Adrian Kempe's numbers. Very interesting note there. Kempe just recently signed an 8-year extension AAV of $10.625 million. So the fact that Tuch wants a higher AAV, he probably wants on an 8-year deal like 10.8, 10.9, probably around $11 million. So that's giving people pause as to could he still sign in Buffalo. I'm not sure if the Sabres really want to go as high as $11 million. And personally, I think at highest, Tuch's a $9.5 million player. I don't think he's in the double digits. So we shall wait and see what happens there. Maybe with Yarmuk and Clan, LGM, they could sort of convince him to take a lower AAV. But according to a couple of recent reports on TSN, they said that apparently Tuch's ask is above Adrian Kempe. So we shall wait and see what happens there. But some very interesting news updates from the past couple of days. And lastly, going over to a couple of trade rumors. So we've got a couple of trade rumors here to talk about. First, with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Elliot Friedman was recently talking about the Pittsburgh Penguins in the aftermath of the Skinner for Jarry trade, and he says, could the Penguins look to try and maybe flip Brett Kulak at the trade deadline? Now, in our last 30, we talked about how the Penguins might look to move Stuart Skinner and flip him at the trade deadline because they already have Marushov, Blomqvist, and Seelovs, two of which could easily be an NHL tandem for the young up-and-coming Pittsburgh Penguins team. But another interesting possibility is flipping Brett Kulak. He's got $2.7, I think, million on his AAV. This is the final year of his deal. So if they were to retain about 50% of his contract and Kulak starts to play a lot like he did in years past in Edmonton, he would be a very interesting trade candidate because he could be a serviceable third-pair defenseman, and if the Penguins were to retain some money on him, bump that cap it down to like $1.4 million, there would be a ton of teams would have some massive interest in trying to acquire him. So I'm not going to say it's a guarantee. The Penguins do have a very interesting defensive core that just placed Dumba on waivers, so I'm not exactly sure how the Penguins really want to move forward with them now on a 6-game losing streak and sort of losing hope in the playoffs very, very quickly in a very competitive Eastern Conference. So we shall wait and see what happens there. I'm not going to say it's a guarantee by any means Kulak gets moved, but I think if the Penguins continue to fall off and they're like 5 to 6 points out of a playoff spot come the trade deadline, I could see Kulak be a guy who ends up getting moved. So we shall wait and see on that, but keep your eye on Brett Kulak as he could be a guy who ends up getting flipped, so very interesting note there. Next, going over to Phillip Danault. According to some recent reports from Marco D'Amico, Phillip Danault wants a trade. According to his sources, he says that Danault would like to be dealt out of the LA Kings organization sooner rather than later. He says that Danault ideally would like to get dealt before the roster freeze tomorrow, so we shall wait and see what happens there. That is another thing I forgot to mention. The roster freeze is tomorrow, so from December 20th to December 27th, there could be no moves. So we shall wait and see if there's any moves that happen between now and then, but according to D'Amico, he says that Danault has asked for a trade and wants to be traded potentially before the roster freeze, and he says that Montreal, New Jersey, and Carolina are teams who have interest, and that doesn't surprise me at all. In our last video, we talked about how Montreal is potentially talking to Los Angeles about Phillip Danault, so that makes a whole bunch of sense in my opinion. Carolina's been looking for a second line center. Danault could fit that bill, so that makes a whole bunch of sense. New Jersey, they've been looking for a top line forward for a while. We've heard them looking to Ryan O'Reilly and Brayden Schenn, who are solid second line centers. Phillip Danault makes a whole bunch of sense for the Devils too, so I wouldn't be surprised if there was a couple of other teams out there too who might have some serious interest in trying to add Phillip Danault. But very interesting note there that D'Amico does say that Danault wants a trade and wants to trade soon, and that we could wind up seeing some sort of a move happen, potentially before the roster freeze, so we should wait and see on that. But keep your eye on Phillip Danault and the LA Kings, as it seems like that situation is starting to get really tedious, and we might see a trade at some point, so we should wait and see on that. Next, going over to Adam Proto of the Hockey News, he was talking about the Carolina Hurricanes, and he says with the recent emergence of Bronson Bussi and how well he's played, how good Kochekov's played since returning from injuries, could that lead to a Frederik Andersen trade? That's very interesting. Anderson's in the final year of his deal. I think he's got like a $2 million AAV. There are a couple of teams out there, mainly in my opinion Montreal and Columbus. There could be a couple other teams too out there who need some more structured goaltending for their teams. So moving Andersen might be a little bit of a puzzling move, but Bussi has been a revelation ever since being acquired off waivers by Carolina, as I think he's won like 11 of his first 12 games. Like, he's been insanely good. And Kochetkov, whenever he's been able to get into the lineup, he's also been pretty gosh dang good for the Carolina Hurricanes. So very interesting note there. I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen with that, but it's a very interesting concept, because if the Canes want to try and add like a second line center or a top 9 forward or maybe someone on the blue line, they're going to have to give up something to get something, and maybe giving up Andersen to try and acquire that thing, or maybe moving Andersen for picks and prospects to flip to try and get that thing, is a possibility. And I think flipping Andersen maybe last year wasn't as good of an option because they didn't really have any sort of concrete solution in net, but now with Bussi and Kochetkov both playing well, they might be all right with moving on from Frederik Andersen and maybe moving him to help some other position of need. So I think that's a possibility. I'm not sure if they really want to have two young goaltenders going into the playoffs, which I think I'd be a little bit scared about, but if they can move Andersen to get some sort of an upgrade with Bussi and Kochetkov playing so well, I could see that happen. So we'll have to wait and see on that, but keep your eye on the Carolina Hurricanes, as they could very likely make some sort of a move involving Frederik Andersen. And lastly, going back over to TSN, on the recent Insider Training video, Pierre LeBrun was talking about some things, and he says that in the aftermath of the Quinn Hughes deal, Rasmus Anderson in Calgary is getting a whole bunch more attention. He says that with Hughes now off the board, there's definitely a couple of other defensemen who are going to be getting some interest from teams who did not acquire him, such as teams like Detroit, New Jersey, the Rangers potentially, the Sabres potentially. There are a couple of teams in on Quinn Hughes who did not get him, so they're probably going to have to switch gears at this point in time. And apparently, according to Pierre LeBrun, he says that trade interest in Rasmus Anderson is picking up, which makes a whole bunch of sense. Anderson going into the season was probably the top trade acquisition on the blue line. Now, of course, after the Quinn Hughes stuff, he became the secondary guy, but with Hughes now off the board, he's once again the top free agent defenseman on the market. He's making $4.5 million. He's got this last year on his deal, and I think for a whole bunch of teams, he'd be a top pair defenseman. So I think the Flames could still get a really good haul. I know they've been winning a whole bunch lately, but I still think this team should try and sell off some pieces and go after McKenna. I think it'll be a really smart move there for the Flames. So I could definitely see this team move Anderson. I think the ask would probably be like a first round pick, a really good prospect, or maybe something else like another draft pick, a lower prospect, or maybe even a roster player. So we should wait and see what happens there. But apparently another team who has had some interest in Rasmus Anderson is Toronto, as they have been checking in on Anderson. So we should wait and see what happens there. No guarantees by any means that Anderson does get dealt, but I think with him being a pending orphan, the Flames one of the few teams who looks like they're not going to make the playoffs this year, I could definitely see a trade happen in the very near future. So we should wait and see on that. But that's what I want to talk for today. I left your guys' thoughts. Do you think Rasmus Anderson gets dealt by the Calgary Flames? Do the Carolina Hurricanes look to move off Frederik Andersen, remember, with a Bussi and Kochetkov tandem? Do the LA Kings move Philip Deneau? Could it happen in the next 48 hours? And do you think that the Pittsburgh Penguins could flip Brett Kulak at the trade deadline? Definitely your thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. That's all I want to talk for today. If you like this video, and if you're liking, subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to without all of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget the subscribe button down below. Don't forget to comment. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. Don't forget to stay tuned for videos coming in the very near future. I also do a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that. So don't forget to check that out. I'll link to that in the description below. Can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.